Hello everyone, Alan Sense here, and welcome to this segment on the world's nuclear arsenals, Part 2. So in Part 1, we looked at the so-called officially recognized nuclear armed states in the world, and in this segment, we are going to look at the other nuclear armed states in the world. So let's get to it. So the learning objectives for this segment: by the time we're done, you should be familiar with the approximate number of nuclear warheads in the arsenals of the unofficial nuclear armed states, and you should be familiar with the approximate number and type of delivery systems possessed by each of the unofficial nuclear armed states. So let's start off with Israel. Obviously a lot of attention on Israel's nuclear arsenal. But amazingly, we know almost nothing about it. It's been an extraordinarily secret arsenal. So we don't know what the warhead yield range might be of the Israeli arsenal. We think there's about 80 total warheads in that arsenal, and we think there might be between 1.6 to 12 megatons of total explosive yield in that arsenal, but that range just illustrates really how much we don't know, as much as it illustrates what we do know. The Israeli delivery systems are basically concentrated on the Jericho-2 missile, which is a medium-range missile. There is the Jericho-3 under development. It may be operational, it might not be. So I'm just sticking with the Jericho-2 for now. And we don't even know how many they have, maybe about 50. You see that number pop up in a couple of places, but it's really uncertain. It's also possible that there are some strike aircraft in the Israeli Air Force that are capable of delivering nuclear weapons, but again, we don't know. And so this is an arsenal that we really know very little about. So these are just rough estimates. When it comes to India, the Indian warheads seem to be in the range of between 15 to 200 kilotons for a total number of warheads between 90 to 110, which would mean an explosive potential of roughly 1 megaton in the total arsenal of India. The Indian delivery system capacity is almost entirely invested in medium-ranged ballistic missiles, the Agni and Prithvi missiles, of which there are about 54. It's possible that some of the strike aircraft in the Indian Air Force could carry a nuclear weapon or be adapted to carry a nuclear weapon, but there's no real evidence that is the case. So the Indian nuclear force is quite powerful and has a quite capable strike capability. There's even some question about acquiring a ballistic missile submarine in the future. Here's Pakistan. Warheads in the sub-kiloton to 50 kiloton range, maybe 100 to 120 warheads, and perhaps 1.7 total megatons in yield. Again, delivery systems primarily in the form of medium-range ballistic missiles, particularly the Ghauri missile system. Maybe some of the strike aircraft could be adapted to carry nuclear warheads, but we really don't know. And here's North Korea, and of course, talking about not knowing stuff, there's not a whole lot we do know about the North Korean arsenal. We think maybe a warhead yield range between the sub-kiloton to 8 kiloton range. Maybe 6 to 8 warheads. That's highly conjectural. It's based on estimates of how much fissile material they may have been able to produce, so no one really knows. And the estimate of maybe a total of 50 kilotons in the arsenal is again just based on essentially guesswork. The delivery systems are obviously the subject of a lot of news items. The question is, do they have an intercontinental ballistic missile capability that can hit North America? And the general consensus right now is no. They have a system, the Taepodong-2, that might be able to hit parts of Alaska, but the system seems to be quite unreliable. So there's real questions about the actual ICBM capability of North Korea. We do know that they have quite a few medium-range ballistic missiles, but again, we're not quite sure whether any of them are actually capable of carrying a warhead. And one of the big questions about the North Korean arsenal is, do their warheads actually fit onto a payload of a missile? Are they weaponized? Can they actually be deployed effectively? Or are they larger devices that weigh too much and are too physically large to fit on a delivery system? We don't know. They have quite a few bombers and strike aircraft. Again, it's highly unlikely that any of them are ready to deploy nuclear weapons, but perhaps they could be adapted to do that. So a lot we don't know here about the North Korean arsenal. So if we take a step back now and look at the big picture, if we include the nuclear weapon states, the official nuclear weapon states of the NPT, so the countries we looked at in the first segment, and if we look at the countries we just looked at and we add it all up, there are between 17,646 and 17,866 warheads in the world's nuclear arsenals today. And the total destructive power in the world's nuclear arsenals is somewhere between 1,682 and 1,693 megatons. Now, I just want to mention something. When we talk about counting warheads and we talk about counting delivery systems, we can't forget that this is really the tip of the iceberg. All of these warheads and delivery systems require an enormous infrastructure in order to sustain them and maintain them at readiness. That's people, it's facilities, and of course it's budget. Here's an example. So here's a number of B-52s at a U.S. Air Force base. And so we've just counted these B-52s. But what we're not counting is the flight crew, we're not counting the ground crew, we're not counting all the equipment that's needed to maintain these aircraft and keep them flying, we're not counting the air base and all the people required to run and operate the air base. So there's just an enormous infrastructure involved just in keeping these B-52s in the air. And here's another example. This is an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, and it's in this dry dock for refit and repair. And what's important about this is just look at how much infrastructure is involved here. I mean, first of all, you've got the dry dock, then you've got all the workers in the dry dock, you've got all the technicians working on the submarine. This scene is taking place at a U.S. Navy base, probably Norfolk in West Virginia or in San Diego. You have that whole base with all the people on the base, multiple dry docks with multiple submarines in them. I mean, it's extraordinary when you think about the number of people, all the equipment, and of course the amount of money that's been invested in these nuclear arsenals all around the world. Now, these are examples from the United States, but you think about all the other countries that possess them, including some countries that frankly don't have a lot of money, and you begin to, I think, get a sense of just how much resources are invested in these arsenals. Okay, so here were the learning objectives for parts 1 and 2. By now, you should be familiar with the approximate number of nuclear warheads in the arsenals of the nuclear armed states, and you should be familiar with the approximate number and type of delivery systems possessed by each nuclear armed state. Okay, so that's it. Again, don't feel that you've got to memorize everything, but you should be able to now contextualize the numbers, be able to carry out a conversation and have a sense of the relative size of these arsenals in terms of the number of warheads and in terms of the number of delivery systems. And we're going to use this quite a bit in class, so it's important to have this sense of the size of the world's nuclear arsenals. I'll see you again soon.